Hey friends, looking for a fun way to celebrate the upcoming holiday season? This simple and fun Northern Lights tutorial is perfect for anyone just getting started with watercolor, or for anyone wanting to make a thoughtful, vibrant handmade gift. Okay, so first let's go over the materials. The watercolor paper that I am using is by Fabriano Artistico, and it is 100% cotton, 300 GM, 140 pounds. I definitely recommend using that weight of paper because we're going to be doing the wet on wet technique. So you're going to want a good quality watercolor paper that's going to be able to withstand that amount of water. And I'm using 5 by 7 inches, which is about the size of a postcard. And I'm not going to be taping it to a board because it is a watercolor block. And the tape that I'm using is just Scotch masking tape. And then also to blot my watercolor brushes of excess water, I'm going to be using this kitchen towel. You can also use any rag or paper towel. And then 2 jars for water, one for dirty water, one for clean. And then the brushes I'll be using, the first one is a flat 3/4 inch brush by Princeton, the Neptune series. And you don't have to use the exact same materials or brushes that I'm using. And then also a size 4 round brush by Silver Brush. I'll be using this one for the final steps for splattering the white gouache for the starry sky. And then the brush that I'll be using the most, well, I should say for the trees at least, is a size 12 round brush. It has a pointy tip, which is great for making pine trees. You can use a smaller brush as well, but this is one of my favorite because it holds a lot of water and it's got a nice pointy tip. And for palettes, I'm using a ceramic palette by Medine. And then for the watercolors themselves, I'll be using a dark blue indigo and also ultraviolet purple and Daniel Smith opera pink, viridian green, and white gouache. Okay, so let's swatch our colors. The first color we're going to do is a dark blue. I'm using Daniel Smith indigo. You could also use Prussian blue or cobalt. Any dark blue will work well. And the next shade we're going to do is ultraviolet purple. If you don't have purple, you can mix blue with red. You could also use dioxazine purple. And for the next shade, we're going to do a bright pink, which is opera pink. You could also use quinacridone rose. And this last shade is optional. I'm doing viridian green just to give a hint of green in the tree line, but that's completely optional, so don't feel like you need to use that one. Okay, so now my paper is all taped on all 4 sides with the masking tape. So here you're just seeing me using some clean water to pre-wet the surface. We will be using a wet on wet technique. So we're just going to be dropping that paint in and really letting it flow. For the Northern Lights paintings, I find that wet on wet technique is best. And I am using my 3/4 inch flat brush, but you can use any brush that you're comfortable with to do this technique. And I'm just making sure that there is a nice even coat of water, that there are no puddles. I'm using my paper towel or kitchen towel to get rid of any excess water that is pooling towards the sides. Okay, so while the paper is still plenty wet, I'm going in with my initial shade, that is going to be the Opera Pink. Using my flat brush, I'm just going downward and I'm tilting my paper so that that paint can flow down the page. And I'm not doing a perfect gradient here. I'm making sure to leave plenty of white space to indicate that light shining through for the Northern Lights. And then next going in with my purple, very lightly, not wanting to mess up that initial wash of the pink, and leaving plenty of white space. And just having fun with it, tilting my board so that that paper, so the paint flows down and the colors blend together. And at the bottom, I'm just using my towel to wipe off some excess paint, water that is collecting, so that it doesn't create any unwanted splotches. And then in the corners, I'm using my indigo, not going in with a totally darkened version, but a medium consistency. The paint is going to dry much lighter when it's dry, so I don't want to go in with too light of a shade. And then also blending in the colors, adding in a little bit more pink. Feel free to stop here or you can keep going, but do keep in mind that depending on where you live, the paper can dry pretty quickly and you can end up with some splotchy cauliflower effects. And then I'm just, going in with a darker version of my colors, darker version of purple. Also, I am using some clean water and then just dabbing my brush on my paper towel to blend the colors. And I'm keeping my paper at an angle to just keep everything flowing. And if you're new to watercolor, this will take some practice. It's just a matter of water control and kind of getting a sense of how quickly the paper's drying. So here I'm just putting some final touches. You can see that my paper is starting to dry because I went in with my brush, and in that top left corner you can see a little splotch there that I made with my brush, and that's because the paper is starting to dry. So I'm going to stop there and I'm going to let that dry. While we're letting that initial layer sky dry, I'm going to show you how I do my trees. So for the tree line, we're going to keep it really simple. The way I like to do trees is to just do a thin line. It doesn't have to be perfectly straight, and I'm just feathering out the branches. And I'm using a size 12 round brush by the Silver Brush Company, but feel free to use a smaller brush to have more control and an easier time doing those thin lines. But if you're new to doing watercolor pine trees, I definitely recommend practicing a few times before going into the final piece. And as I move along the tree line, I'm switching up my colors a bit. I started with the indigo and now I'm going in with a watered down version of the Viridian. But feel free to use different colors. You can use the purple or opera pink as well. It's really up to you, or you can just use one color if you're comfortable with that. You can just do a more watered down version of the indigo. As long as you're doing different value variations, and what I mean by that is just a different amount of water in the pigment. So as you're moving to the center of the tree line, Try to keep those trees a lighter value so the paint is going to have more water. This is going to give the illusion that the light is shining through into those trees. Okay, so that is a quick little tip on how I do my trees. Now the background is dry and we're going to do our tree line. So I'm starting with a more saturated version of the indigo, and I'm going to get lighter as I move towards the center. So I'm starting on the left and I'm going down very delicately with the tip of my brush and then doing the same technique that I showed you previously, feathering out. Sorry you can't see because my hand is in the way, but yeah, there you go. You can see how I'm feathering out those branches, and I'm just gonna keep doing this all across, and I'm gonna make sure that each tree has a different height. That will make the tree line look more realistic and more interesting. And I tend to like to do a framing format where I keep the trees towards the side taller and getting shorter and shorter as you go in, but still keeping the trees a different height. And I'm just speeding up this part of the clip, pretty much just repeating what you saw me do um, in the practice session for these trees. Getting lighter towards the center, using different colors, dropping in some purple and pink. And I'm just going to keep doing that until I get to the end. So moving on to the last step, after the tree line has dried, I'm going to use white gouache to splatter in the sky to make it starry. I'm using M. Graham's titanium white, but any white gouache will do just fine. And putting a little bit on my palette, and I'm going to add just a touch of water using a size 4 round brush and just adding enough water to just get it a little more loose so that it splatters. I don't want it too thick or else it's not gonna come off the brush. But I also don't want it too thin because I want the white to show up. And if you add too much water, it'll be too watered down and it won't come out as good. So I just grabbed my other paintbrush and I'm just tapping my size 4 round brush against the handle, and I used a paper towel to cover up the trees. Um, and then just, yeah, lowering it to get the lower section. If you get some white paint on your trees though, it's not the end of the world. It'll still look good. And I just keep doing that. So we're pretty much done here. After everything is dry, I'm going to remove my tape. So that does it for our tutorial. I hope you enjoyed this, everyone. If you have any questions or comments, do let me know in the comment section. And if you enjoyed this tutorial, be sure to like and subscribe to my channel. I'll be sure to have a lot more tutorials and maybe some northern lights in the future. Yeah, have a great day. Thanks for joining.